What is going on, everybody? Welcome back. It is Saturday morning. So the ESP LTD came in yesterday, and we did the unboxing with it. And so one of the things I mentioned yesterday that I would talk about today is kind of why I think most guitar reviews do it wrong, and I think I've done it wrong a bunch too. So I've really been giving it a lot of thought. If we're going to do this, sort of trying to find a good guitar for X amount of dollars or whatever, that we would want to kind of do it right and kind of skip some of the things that make guitar reviews ineffective and honestly contribute to a lot of the negative community on the internet. So, what is a review supposed to do? Well, here's the problem: is that everything. Let's talk about the problem first. That when a review comes out, usually it immediately becomes a comparison. This is where the just as good as thing, the punch is above its weight, this is a Gibson killer, all that stuff. You could spend $200 more and get this other guitar. This is definitely a $1,500 guitar for $400, right? Like all of that stupid stuff. But I don't think that anybody really understands the guitar that they have in front of them with those kinds of statements. And in fact, all that really does is that just divides people, because people that say those things or ask those things mostly have that guitar already, and they're just trying to justify their own purchases. My philosophy on this is a lot simpler. What is the guitar supposed to be? What is it supposed to do? What does it do what it says? Does it function correctly? Was it manufactured correctly? Right? Was the intended design of the guitar executed well? Those to me are more important. I can put that in front of you, and then you can decide whether you want it or not. Okay? I can't assign value to an instrument for you. I can't assign a value to anything for you, right? I can't do that. I don't need to decide by a review what other guitar you should buy, right? So I shouldn't say, if I'm reviewing this ESP, I'm reviewing that guitar. I'm not reviewing a $700 guitar. I'm not reviewing a used Mexican Fender. I'm not reviewing, whatever happens to be on sale this week. Well, I saw this good deal on that thing, so is it as good as that one? That just makes no sense. Those are all completely different buying decisions. If you want a comparison, that's a comparison video. That's not a review, right? So what I want to do is I want to look at the product and see if it's good. That's it. That's what I think is really important. You can make the rest of those decisions, and you can make all those just as good as posts, and you can do all that stuff. I'm not going to do that. Does this guitar successfully accomplish what it was designed and sold to accomplish, right? And as an extension of that, sort of look at what the intended market for the guitar is. Okay, so you could say, whatever you want, but when you look at the brand and where they're placing this guitar, who is it for? Because that's important too. I always say that there's really no such thing as bad gear. There isn't. The problem is that people say this is bad because it really wasn't intended for them, right? It was intended for somebody else who had different needs than them. That's usually the case. So, first of all, does the thing work? Does the truss rod work? Can the guitar be properly set up within the setup adjustments on the guitar? It doesn't need to come that way, but can it do it? Does it intonate correctly? Do the tuners function correctly? Do they slip? How do they feel? Like that kind of thing. Does the bridge work? Does it do what it's supposed to do? The electronics work? Are they wired right? Is it stable? does everything physically do what it's supposed to do, right? That's number one. And this is should not be subjective. And cheap does not excuse what the guitar is actually supposed to do. So if I get a guitar and it's got a problem, it's a problem. It's not, well, the guitar is only $300, so what did you expect? No, you bought a guitar. It should function as a guitar. Like I always say, you don't buy a vacuum cleaner that doesn't work without returning it. If it doesn't do what it says on the tin, it doesn't do what it says on the tin. You return it. End of story. That should not be subjective. That should be, this thing should work. Everything should work, right? Um, you know, so, it doesn't need to have premium parts at $300, but it should work. Everything should work. That's like a non-negotiable. So if I get a cheap guitar that's not stable, that doesn't stay in tune, that the neck doesn't stay straight, that's non-negotiable. End of story. That's a fail, right? And then the execution of the instrument should match the goal of the instrument. And this is where you kind of have to be careful. So quality over preference, right? So if it's a gloss finish guitar, is it done well? Are there like foggy spots in it? Does it have bad buffing areas? Does it have burn through? Does it have whatever? Not, I prefer satin. I want a gloss top with a satin back. Not like that. Is it executed well? If it's a relic, I hate relic guitars, but is they intended for this? Did they do it well? That's really, really important. If it's a vintage spec guitar, was that executed properly? And when it's a vintage spec guitar, I'm not going to complain or say, well, it doesn't have stainless frets. Well, it shouldn't have stainless frets. It's a vintage spec guitar. So, review what they made, not what you wish they made, right? Like, look at the guitar for what it is, not what you wish it was, okay? So to see if this is a good product or not. Now, that doesn't mean you have to like it. That doesn't mean you have to choose it. But to do a review, you have to review the product in front of you, not something else, which is what happens about 90% of the time. If something is wrong, why is it wrong? Okay. And this also can get a little tricky for people because a lot of people have expectations and misunderstandings about guitars. If it has fret sprout, is it so bad that it is a situation where it appears that it was environment? Because so some things with the setup could be, and I don't mean setup, but I mean like fret sprout's a good example. Sometimes it could just be a bad fret that was done incorrectly, or sometimes it could be environmental because of where the guitar has traveled, humidity, shipping, all that kind of stuff. The same thing with action and neck relief and all that kind of stuff. If the guitar is not set up perfectly, then that doesn't really matter because the guitar moves around. So as long as the guitar can be set up by a competent setup person within the limits of the hardware, then it's good. Because I know people argue about, well, it should just be set up like that straight out of the box. But the thing is it's not. When it moves, it moves. It's going to do it. And you need to have it in your house to figure out what that's going to be. And I don't know how you play. I don't know if you need it, your nut height at 15 thousandths or 18 thousandths or 20 thousandths. And I can't tell that for you. So it's just got to be within, right? It's just got to be within. That's all that really matters. If you find something wrong with a guitar, that's not necessarily the end of the review. It just, we need to understand what the problem is and where it came from. And if it is a manufacturing issue, sometimes is it a design problem? Is it a parts choice problem? This saddle is kind of crappy actually, and the way you adjust it, it's a little bit loose, or the tuners will have a little slip or whatever. Understanding. So we're not hunting for flaws, but when we see them, we're trying to understand what they are, right? And that's it. I mean, everything else about a review is kind of subjective, really, when it comes down to it. Um, and if we use those words, objective and subjective, correctly, this guitar punches above its weight is pointless. What are we measuring, right? What are we measuring? This guitar is just as good as that guitar that's twice its price. Just as good as what? The fretwork, the finish, the hardware, the electronics, the materials. Good is, that is not an expectation. Just as good as, or a specification. It's not a specification. If the $399 guitar has good fretwork and it all seems great, then it's good. Not good as something else, not just as good as, it's just good. If the finish is well executed, it's well executed. End of story. When you say this guitar is basically a $1,500 guitar for $400, that's not useful. It's not useful because it's not. This makes buying especially for inexperienced people, a lot more confusing, and I really hate this. I really can't stand this mentality. This is why I don't like the just as good as guys. This is why it just drives me insane. Because when you say just as good as, or punches above its weight, or anything like that, or this $399 guitar is just as good as this $1,500 guitar, then an experienced player who has some ability for nuance will be able to discover the differences between those guitars as they play it. It doesn't mean that the $399 guitar is bad. It just means that they will be able to, once they get the guitar, oh yeah, it's definitely just a $400 guitar. It's good, but it's just a $400 guitar. This is something, honestly, that the Harley Benton guys can't do for some reason. Most of them, or a lot of them, I should say, a lot of them. If it's a $299 guitar, it's okay. That's okay. That's totally fine, because that's what it was designed to be, right? So if you say that this one is just as good as this one, you're not doing a very good job describing the guitar. Because here's the thing, compromise on an inexpensive instrument isn't a bad thing. We have to compromise to cut price. It has to happen. And for those of you that think that that's not possible, that think that that's not necessary, I would strongly encourage you, instead of saying something mean here, I would strongly encourage you to try to understand some more business philosophy and really understand how business works. Because the bottom line is this: the $500 guitar is more expensive to make than a $299 guitar. An $800 guitar is more expensive to make than a $500 guitar. Now, there is some brand in that, but it's not 100%. There are concessions that need to be made to make a guitar less expensive. It's just reality. It's how business works. And the multipliers used may seem unreasonable to you, meaning that, if you put a part on a guitar that's $5 and then you make it $8, then the guitar price goes up $20. That may not make sense to you, but if you have understanding of how business works, then it does. And you're like, this is what has to happen. Okay. It's something that I know that many folks do not understand, but when you spend time in business and you understand manufacturing, those multipliers, those differences in quality and cost of products and parts and labor and all that stuff, it starts to make sense more. Okay. So you have to make compromises to make a guitar cheaper. That doesn't mean the guitar is bad. It doesn't mean it's worse. So when we say this is a $299 guitar, that's just there's nothing more there than that. That doesn't mean it's bad unless it is bad. It just means that here's where they compromised. This is where they had to cut costs. Now, We can put those cost cuts in there, and we can say, this is where they cut costs. Does that matter to you? This guitar doesn't have binding. This guitar has dots instead of blocks. This guitar has this cheaper material. This guitar has less expensive hardware. And you can make the value proposition based on that information, whether you think that those cuts in budget for that instrument are important to you or not, or whether you want to actually then go ahead and spend more money or upgrade that once you get it, to understand that, right? Like, and that's a really important distinction to make, that there's nothing wrong, and nobody listens to this part of the video. There's nothing wrong with inexpensive guitars. They're made for this purpose, and they're made for the market that they're made for. But we need to treat them as what they are, not what we think they should be, right? That's a really important distinction to make. I am actually, I got to tell you, this ESP thing, it's probably one of the nicest guitars we've had in here when it comes to the execution for the price point. It's really, really good. It's really good. And I'm really enjoying it. You know, I think it's going to be fun. This is going to be really fun. And I genuinely am going to enjoy messing around with this $399 guitar. You know, for all you morons that think I don't like cheap guitars, this thing's really fun. It's going to be cool. Now, if there's personal preferences in a review, that makes sense, because there's going to be, but just label it. You know, just label. I don't like this neck shape. I'm a huge fan of roasted maple, for example. You may not be. So I'll just tell you, this is a really, you know, if it's an opinion thing, you just have to label it. There's a difference between I don't like this and it's bad. It's bad if it doesn't function or if it doesn't do what the guitar says it's going to do. I don't like this is totally different. And you should know what you're hearing when you say that. Or when you hear that in a video, in a review. Yeah, I mean, I think we should just be really, really transparent about this stuff. I think it's going to be fun. I've been thinking about this a lot because I have a bunch of reviews coming up, and sponsored stuff and not sponsored stuff, and sponsored by you, you know, Patreon viewers and stuff. And so I'm really excited about it, actually. So, ultimately, I'm not going to pick your guitar for you. You're going to pick your guitar for you. Okay. Maybe you're deciding between this inexpensive guitar and this one that costs a little bit more, or you're deciding between these two expensive guitars, or maybe you don't want either of those and you want something completely different, right? If I say Harley Benton versus Firefly and somebody says some other brand, that's what happens, right? You know, maybe the thing that I consider a drawback with the instrument is the reason you want it, right? So that's totally fine. That's not my business. That's your business. My job is to show you what's in front of you. My job is not to create some sort of comparison chart and to try to read your mind through the camera about what you value in life. That's not my place. You can compare that information. You could know if it's good or not to you. I can tell you if it functions. I can tell you if it does what it's supposed to do. And that's it. And I'm really looking forward to it.